Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Lev Grossman, who is a speculative fiction author. And Lev, I'm going to let you explain what it is exactly that you write.
That's well, it's a fair question. Although I'm very bad at explaining it. I actually started my career as a more of a literary writer, and it wasn't until mid-career when I wrote The Magicians that I really found my voice, and it turned out my voice was a fantasy voice. It was a genre voice, and so that is what I've stuck to ever since. The Magicians was probably more straightforward fantasy. The new book, Bright Sword, is about King Arthur, and that always shades over into historical fiction. But I will say that my Arthur is a very fantastical Arthur. There's a lot of magic in this one.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your latest book, the Bright Sword?
Yes, the Bright Sword is it's a retelling. It's a retelling of the King Arthur legend. And I guess the most obvious new thing about it is that where most tellings of the King Arthur story end with Arthur's death, this one really begins with Arthur's death, and a, sort of one of the major narrative lines of it is about what happened after Arthur died, which is that well, most of the Round Table died with him at the Battle of Camlan, and so there's only a few nights left over at Camelot when Arthur's gone, and it falls to them to figure out what happens next and basically find a new king and put him on the throne and bring back, the great days, the age of Arthur. And it's not who you're thinking. It's not Lancelot. It's not Galahad. It's not Gawain. Lancelot is retired, and all of the other major heroes are dead. So what you get is these characters from the very edges of the story, um, very, very minor characters who suddenly find themselves in a position of being brought to center stage, and now they have to become heroes in a way that they never really did before.
So, what was the inspiration behind the book?
Well, I always loved King Arthur.
Hmm.
One of the things I love about the story is that it kind of changes its meaning from century to century. People say that science fiction is set in the future, but it's really about the present. And I think you could say the same thing about King Arthur. It's set in the past, but it's really about the present. For T.H. White, it was about violence and war because he was in the mid 20th century. For Marion Zimmer Bradley, it was about feminism and neo paganism. And so I felt as though if you wrote an Arthur story now, what would it be about? How would you write a King Arthur story that would sort of speak to this present moment that we're in? Uh, and I was thinking about Game of Thrones, which is that story really is about the death of a king and what happens afterwards, and how the country becomes kind of broken and divided against itself. And when I thought about that, when I thought about what Arthur's world would look like, that chivalric world that we know so well, but kind of darkened and made chaotic. I felt like I recognized it. I felt like this is something really modern. This is something that looks like what our world looks like. And how would you navigate that world if it was the world of Arthur? And how would you go about trying to put it back together? It's a almost a post-apocalyptic story, which I think there's reasons why those stories are so popular right now. They speak to a kind of a sense of I don't know, collapse, of disorientation that we have now. Um, and that's what made me want to write the Bright Sword, to see if we could write an Arthur that felt both ancient and modern at the same time.
So, what do you think draws readers to these books?
It's an interesting question. I didn't realize when I started researching this book how old the Arthur story is, but we
Mm.
have traces of it going back to probably the 7th century. So we've been telling the same story over and over again for more than 1,000 years, which is an amazing thing that a story would survive that long and hold our attention for that long. And I think it's partly about that feeling of having just missed the golden age. There was a moment in the past when everything was good, and everything was right, and that was Camelot. And that feeling of that age passing away, I feel like that's almost been a constant in human history. We always feel as though we just missed that moment. And then the other thing that strikes me about it is the way that the knights they're always striving. It's a very Christian story, and they are striving to match the kind of ideal of virtue, the ideal of chivalry, that has been set up for them, and uh, they always fail. There's always something human in them that keeps them from perfection. And again, I feel like it's a very timeless story. And of course, it's a story about a family. I think that was one of the ways that I framed it for myself that made it compelling, was thinking about this story as a big family saga, with Arthur at the center of it. Um, but he's got he's a husband, he's a son, he's a father. Um, there's the Morgan Le Fay is part of this family. Gawain is part of this family. It's a huge, extended, dysfunctional family. Um, it's like reminds me of Succession in a way. And thinking of it as a family story and about the consequences for this very good man of the very chaotic family background that he has. Um, Dysfunctional families, I feel like they're always current. We'll always have them,
Yeah.
and that's what this story is.
So you must have had to have done a lot of research for this book. Now, can you tell me about that?
Yeah, this book took me basically it took me 10 years to write, which
Wow.
is a very long time to spend on anything. But certainly to spend on a novel. I'm not a medievalist, or I wasn't when I started. I'm not. I'm not a historian, or even a historian. Was not a historical novelist when I started. So it took me a long, long time to get a feel for that period, that moment that Arthur lived in, which was a really strange, chaotic moment. Basically, we call it the Dark Ages because we know so little about it. But Arthur lived in that weird little pocket of time. The Romans had left Britain, and they had abandoned Britain as a Roman province. The Saxons and the Angles and everybody else hadn't really taken over in Britain. So you had this moment where nobody was in charge, and it was really it was the British had been left to their own devices for the first time in 3.5 centuries, and they didn't know who they were or how to build a country or how to be a nation. And the fantasy of Arthur, one of the wonderful things about him is that that's his moment. That he arrives and he brings the kingdom together, um, and he makes it into this wonderful golden age at an otherwise really chaotic time. So I had to learn about that chaos and all the forces that were at work in Britain, and then also the little things which you don't think about. Uh, what did they, kind of shoes did they wear? When they went to bed, what does their bed look like? What do they eat? What do they wear when they're not wearing armor? All this stuff, all these details. It took a lot of combing through histories to find them.
Mm.
The things that a historical novelist are interested in are not always the same things that the historian is interested in. Maybe the historian doesn't care that much what the bed looks like when they go to bed. But when you're a novelist, you have to know because you have to describe it.
Yeah, you have to explain exactly what it is to other people that are going to be reading it.
And if nobody knows, then you have to make it up.
Right.
But which is fine. But first, you have to make absolutely sure that nobody knows,
Yeah.
which is a lot of work in itself.
True. Okay. So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out The Bright Sword?
I mean, the research was a challenge. It's a large cast of characters. That was a challenge. It had to fit into the Arthurian tradition in a way that felt, on the one hand, both organic, like it was part of that tradition, but also that it was new, that it added to that tradition. And that was a balance that I had a hard time. It was challenging to strike, but probably the hardest part, and the thing, and I'm being to be completely honest, um, was the family stuff, especially the stuff about fathers and sons. I think it is the fate of novelists to be drawn to topics that are also personally very challenging for them. And for me to think about Arthur, how he felt about his father, how he felt about his son, Mordred, um, uh, how he felt about his wife, um, these relationships to make them feel rich and real and authentic. Um, that mix of love and antagonism that's part of all those family relationships. It took me a long time to really feel like I had understood them and made peace with them. You can infer from that, if you like, things about my own family background, or not. But I found that that was kind of a journey for me to get to a place where I really felt like I understood that emotional world that Arthur was in.
So you, in writing this historical type of novel, you already had some of the characters um, that you knew about in a sense through your research, and you just made up some of their characters too. So uh, did you really write the story based more on the characters or really on the plot?
Well, it's interesting. Uh, in the bits where so the book is that the time frame of the book, it moves back and forth between this chaotic time after Arthur's death, um, and then it moves back in time a lot to when Arthur was alive and what was happening then. And in the stuff where Arthur was alive, it's actually a very classic traditional King Arthur telling. You get the sword in the stone. You get the quest for the Holy Grail. You get all that stuff, which we kind of know and love. Um, uh, and so in that case, the characters are very bound by the story, and so they have to fit into it. You have to think about you have to make the characters do what they need to do. The quest for the Holy Grail. Everybody in Camelot goes on the quest except for Arthur. Arthur stays home, and so you really have to think from a character point of view. What was going on for him that made him say, "No, I'm not going. I'm not going with you." And but then also, I had wonderfully, after Arthur's death, hardly anybody has written that story. It's possible
Mm.
that I have never found anybody who's written that story about the world after Arthur's death. So it was blank space on the map, and there I let the characters run the show, and just they could do whatever felt right and correct for them, which is both actually kinds of writing are wonderful, but they are very different. And it's fun when the characters take the lead. Um, uh, um, if you let them off the leash, they always know what to
Right.
do.
So are you a pantser or a outliner?
Well, I'm a big outliner. I uh, I get nervous about starting a book, writing a book when I don't know the structure of it. Um, and I sort of don't trust myself. When you're pantsing it, you're sort of saying, well, future Lev will know what to do when we get to that part. So I'm just going to leave it with him. And I sit down and I don't trust future Lev to know what to do. So that Joker, I don't know what he's going to do. So I have to make sure now, present Lev, writes a script for him so that he doesn't do anything stupid. So there was a lot of outlining. In my new book, I'm trying to write a pantser book now, which I never really have done. I don't have a proper outline for my work in progress, but this one followed an outline. Also, there's a lot of moving parts in the Bright Sword. A lot of things have to fit together. You know, there's a real ensemble cast, each of whom has their own complicated backstory that has to fit into the canonical Arthur story as it exists. So this was an outlining job, because the structure had to be sort of just right.
Mm-hmm. Did the characters kind of want to go into a different direction than what you wanted on the outline?
It's always it's always a negotiation, especially with Arthur. Arthur's a very weird character when you really look at him, because after he pulls the sword from the stone and then he sets up the round table, he doesn't do very much. He's a very quiet character. He sits and he listens to the knights. They go on their adventures. They come back. They tell Arthur about it, and then he rises again at the very end of his life, when he gets into this whole conflict with Lancelot. But for a lot of the story, he's very quiet. He doesn't do much. He doesn't say much, and so I had to sit down with him a lot, and really try to get a sense of what was going on with him, and then figure out how it makes sense for him to do what he does. Him not going on the quest for the Holy Grail, that was I think that's a big moment in his story, and I really felt like I didn't want to fight him. That had to be what he felt was important at that moment. But it took me a long time to figure out why that's the case, why that would be the case. And then for others, someone like Merlin, he's a complicated character who does some really dark things, even in the canonical telling of the story. The way that he helps Uther get into the castle to get to Igraine. This fight that he ends up having with Nimue, his apprentice. He does all the things that Merlin is supposed to do. But when I sat with that character, I felt a lot of darkness, a lot of complexity in him, and it was a case. Which part of him do you lean into? I leaned into the darkness where Merlin was concerned, which is a shame because I love I love Merlin. I love the sort of cute, funny Merlin of the Sword and the Stone. But this was a different guy.
It's interesting. I always considered Merlin more of a, on the nice side and the more, very companionable and not evil. Interesting.
I looked at somebody who helped, a writer who helped me a lot in this project was C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was a great Arthurian scholar and reader. He had great insights into it and into that world. And one thing he pointed out, which I had never really thought about, is that Merlin is obviously a druid. He is obviously part of that tradition. He's heir to the kind of indigenous magical practice of Britain, which raises all kinds of character questions. Why is he at Arthur's court? Why is he serving a Christian, very Christian king when he himself is a pagan? And why is he even alive? The Romans, when they took over Britain, they were brutal to the Druids. They really basically rounded up and exterminated them. Historically, that's what they did. But Merlin survived, and Merlin is still alive. A, long after he would have died of old age, and B, he survived when almost all the other Druids died. And you think about, what did he do? What deal did he cut to spare his own life? I thought about that a lot, and it was I couldn't reconcile it with happy funny Merlin. So again, I ended up going a different way.
What's your favorite character in the book?
No, that's a good question. I can tell you who the easiest character for me to write was, and that was Sir Palomides. Palomides, uh, one of these minor characters who I got interested in. He's a Saracen, which basically means a Muslim. He is a Muslim, but he's in Arthur's Britain. No one has ever really explained why he's there. He's mostly used for comic relief in Mallory, in the Morte d'Arthur. But what was it really like to be for him to be in Britain, to be an outsider in that way? What brought him all the way from probably Baghdad to Britain? What made him stay? What made him fall in love with Isolde, which is the other thing that he does. Isolde loves Tristram, obviously, but Palomides is hopelessly in love with her. And then he's always, when he's not chasing Isolde, he's chasing the questing beast. He's got a lot going on, Palomides. So I wanted to fill in his story, and once I started writing him, his point of view came very easily to me, which doesn't necessarily speak that well of me, because Palomides, because he's a Muslim, he's from Baghdad. He comes from a much more advanced civilization than early medieval Britain, and he kind of looks on everybody else as a savage and barbarian. So I was able to tap into my inner contemptuousness for Palomides very, very easily.
So what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, when you are a writer, you always have to have projects going on. Even as one project is coming out, you have to be well entrenched into other ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually working on a graphic novel. I'm very interested in comics and manga and that kind of storytelling. And so I'm doing a project which will be a comic, and will come out probably in a couple years. It takes a long time, as it turns out, to produce a graphic novel. But I've also written a children's book, picture book. Actually, hardly anybody knows that, but it's coming out from Little Brown probably next year if we can get the pictures drawn. And then I've started a new novel, which I hope will be the first in a series. But you could never tell it. It's still early days.
Wonderful. So when you write a story, sometimes you just feel, do you sometimes feel that it's going to be a series?
Yes. This is it's a story that's very much built around one, hopefully very compelling character, who he has the kind of problems that don't tend to get resolved in one book, or really possibly ever. And characters like that, it's sort of wonderful the way they just create sort of story after story, and it's a very big, complicated universe that he's in. I feel like I couldn't exhaust the storytelling possibilities in one volume. So um, if people respond to it, which is always the big question, if people want more, they will definitely get more.
Hmm. Do you have enough time to answer a few more questions?
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. We're
Okay.
doing.
Okay, great. So, what is your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
I think it's funny. I think early on in my career, uh, uh, my favorite part, I probably have said that my favorite part is that I get to work alone. I was when I was when I was a young man, I was very shy and socially anxious, and it was really important to me that I have a job where I didn't have to talk to anybody. Uh, and sure enough, here I am. But the
To
truth is,
somebody.
uh, having just gone on a big book tour for the Bright Sword, and gone out and met lots of readers. I haven't done that for a few years. I was reminded that actually is the best part. When I was at Worldcon in Glasgow a couple weeks, really just a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, um, they'll do a thing where people will sign up, and it's capped at like a dozen people, and you just sit at a table for an hour, and you just sort of talk and get into stuff with people who've read your books. And when you're a writer, it's not like you're an actor and there's people just right out there enjoying your performance and they clap at the end. When people read your books, it happens silently and very far away. If you never see it happen, uh, usually you don't really hear about it. So to be sitting right down with readers, and have them right there, get to talk to them. I would say that is actually the best part.
Okay. And what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process?
That's a good question.
The writing and
I'm
publishing process.
I'm only pausing because I'm trying to make sure that I'm telling the honest truth. Um, I think for me the hardest part is I'm plagued with a lot of self-doubt. I think writers often are plagued by self-doubt, and you rarely feel it as strongly and keenly as when you were starting a new project, and you really have to say, you really sit there and think, who who am I? Who am I that I would think that I could write a novel, that I could sit there. I'm probably going to spend at least 2 or 3 years writing this. Then I'm going to have to persuade other people to buy it, and like it. The convincing yourself that you're going to be able to do that, um, which is something that many people try to do and fail. Uh, for me to sit and think, I can do that. That's me. Um, I find it very hard. I find it very hard to build up that kind of summon that kind of confidence. And that's the stage I'm in now with my new book. And it's even after 8 books. I think The Bride Sword was my 8th book.
Mhm. Even
Still
after
very
the success of The Magician
yeah,
series.
yeah. I mean, how many writers can you point to who had one success and then never again? There are a lot of them.
Yeah.
Uh, and you have to tell yourself, that's not me. I'm going to write another hit. Um, Sometimes you tell yourself that, but sometimes do you believe it? Sometimes it's hard.
Hmm. That is one thing about writing is that you never know. You never know whether people are going to like your book or not. And yeah, a lot of writers do have self-doubt.
And I used to have it for a long time until I was 47. I had a day job for a long time. I only quit it in 2016 to say, I'm going to be a writer. That's what I'm going to do all day. I have 3 kids, uh, one in college, two not yet there. Uh, I've got to I have to believe that my writing is going to support them and
Right.
keep them safe. Uh, and it's a big leap of faith to take.
Hmm. That's the thing. You have to believe in yourself and you have to believe that, that your writing is good.
Fortunately, I only have to believe it a few hours a day. After I'm done writing for the day, I can hate myself all I want. I'm free. But when I'm sitting down writing, I have to, all that has to go away.
What has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Oh gosh. I have had adventures, and they have, they've been, I adore travel. It's another great part of being a writer is getting to go places. Uh, um, and it always feels like a big adventure. Um, uh, I did a tour in Sweden once. I haven't been back to Sweden for a while. But I did a tour of France. And when you're out there, you're in Europe, these incredibly old, vibrant places. Uh, and you're constantly thinking, how did I get here? Um, how is this my life? It is a big adventure. Uh, and it's incredibly fun. For the first 20 years of my career, I really wasn't very successful as a fiction writer at all. It was Magicians was my first hit, but I'd had two novels before that, which were not very successful. So honestly, anytime someone comes up to me and asks to have their book signed, it's an amazing thing, and I think I'll always really appreciate it.
And some of your books have been made into TV or movie? No, TV, right?
TV, that was an incredible. But I wrote a movie once too. That was amazing. But gosh, getting on a plane, going to Canada where they shot The Magicians, going to that you go in and there's a complex of warehouses, and you go in and inside they've they've built it. Those crazy bastards, they actually built it. They built the Castle Whitespire. They built Breakbills down to incredibly tiny details. How amazing! Even you, it's an out of body experience. Really, really wonderful. But also just you never stop being surprised.
Is it anything like you really imagined it?
Some, yeah, the Breakbill stuff was I mean that was they got it right. I mean they built it the way I imagined it. Fillory, I probably should have been more specific in the books about what Castle Whitespire looks like on the inside. They definitely went their own way with it, but it was great. They had a whole vision for it, which was not really my vision, but it was just as valid as my vision. And they did an
Wow.
amazing
Wow.
fulfilling.
So
And
that is an adventure.
the clothes were so good. The clothes, everybody was so well dressed. Um, I just loved it.
Oh, that's great. That is definitely an adventure, I would think. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
The one that I come back to might not be very interesting, but the one I come back to, I mentioned that I was unsuccessful for a long time, and it's true. I decided that I wanted to be a writer when I was 20, when I was in college. The Magicians was published when I was 40. So there were
Mhm.
20 years when uh, uh, I really wasn't very successful at fiction writing, and the world was telling me over and over again, maybe you should think about, getting into another line of work. Oh, I had another line of work. I had a day job. Maybe you should just focus on that stuff and just let this go. And I couldn't let it go. Um, and it took me a long time to really find my voice as a writer. And so when I meet people who are early on in their careers and struggling, I tell them a lot of things, but one of the things I tell them is never give up. Never give up. If you feel like you're a writer, if you feel like you have something to say that belongs on the page, you are definitely right. And sooner or later, um, if you stick with it, um, you'll get there. And it probably won't take you 20 years, which is most people do it
You
much,
never
much.
know.
I tell them that, and I say, mind your transitions between paragraphs, end of one paragraph, beginning of another. I always point them to that moment in their writing. Good transitions really will get you a lot as a writer.
Okay. So is that the only piece of advice you would give to you want to share with other writers, or do you have any more?
Oh, oh gosh, tons. Um, uh, that for me, the art of being a writer is being very unsentimental about your own writing. People don't like to talk about the marketplace. They don't like to talk about the books that fact that books are commodities that have to be sold. This is probably something that you're quite aware of. But
Yes.
I urge people very much to picture their book in a bookstore, and somebody picks it up, and it's not their mom, and it's not their friend. That person is not your friend. A person is a stranger, and they have no investment in your success. If anything, they are invested in not spending $30 on a book. So you have to uh, you have to make sure that once they look at your book and pick it up, that they have no choice to buy it. That is the bar you have to get over. And it's a pretty high one, and it means often that you have to figure out you absolutely have to say what you want to say and be as emotionally honest as anybody can be, but within the constraints of this has to be a story that people want to read. It has to be the story that people want to read. That means forgetting about yourself and really focusing on other people.
Mm-hmm. So is there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you would recommend to other writers that might have helped you in your career?
It's a good question. The truth is that I've always been a bit of a loner as a writer. I did not go to an MFA program, although I applied. I didn't get in. So I really I write I've written very much by myself. I don't even have a lot of other friends who are writers. Not my close friends. I love on any other day, I would recommend NaNoWriMo to people, the National Novel Writing Month. At this exact moment, NaNoWriMo is going through a controversy about their AI policy.
Yeah, I read that.
The truth is, I'm on the other side from NaNoWriMo on this one, but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's a very old-timey expression. NaNoWriMo it's a very useful tool, and it's a really strong community, and I do recommend it to people.
Yeah, I've heard about the controversy there, but it is a really good thing for new writers, especially, I think.
Yeah.
But this AI thing.
Look, I definitely disagree with strongly,
Me
and
too.
yet we're not going to cancel NaNoWriMo. I think that it's too important. So many people get their start with it, and
Yeah.
uh,
And
uh,
for those people who don't know about NaNoWriMo, it's the national, um, what's it? What is it? The National
Novel Writing Month.
Novel Writing Month. Yeah.
Uh, and everybody sits down and takes 30 days and sees how far they can get and eggs each other on, and you're in it together, you're in it with other people, and that helps you. It lends you so much strength to know that you're in the trenches with other people. It's if you are somebody starting out as a writer, I would look into it. I really would.
Okay. So my next thing, a question about you as a person. What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Uh, I used to think everybody knew this about me, but people are very often surprised to learn A, that I'm an identical twin, and B, that my identical twin is also a novelist, a very good one. Uh,
Wow.
um, his, name is Austin. Probably his best known book is called Soon I'll Be Invincible. It's a novel about superheroes. I believe it's absolutely fantastic. And he has three other three. I'm gonna say three other. There's You, there's Crooked, there's Fight Me. The new one is called Fight Me, which is sort of a semi sequel to the superhero book. Just came out a couple months ago. It's amazing. It's truly incredible what he does.
Great. That is great. Wow.
He looks a lot like me. If I went off camera and he came on camera, you probably would think that it was just me coming back having changed my clothes.
Wow. That must have been really tough growing up. If that are
It's
more
funny.
fun.
Well, people either say, I always wanted to be a twin, or gosh, that must have been tough. And I actually think that it was, in some ways, was very challenging. Definitely when you're an adolescent, being your own person is like kind of where it's at. That's what you're trying to do. And when there's another person who looks just like you, who you're constantly being mistaken for, yeah, I think that was pretty challenging for both of us. But we're past that.
Oh, that's good. And also, people probably don't know that you're living in Australia.
That's true. That's true. I'm speaking to you from Sydney, Australia. My wife is from Sydney. We lived in New York for 20 years, and a couple of years ago we decided to make a change and spend some years here. Uh, I love it here. Everybody should come to Australia, even though it's a long way away.
Okay. So are your passions when you're not writing, and how do you make time to do the things that you love?
Uh, um, it actually is difficult to make a lot of time with it for that stuff. Even uh, especially having three kids. I mean, being a father is mostly what I do when I'm not writing. Uh, but I love to cook. That's a big thing that we do together as a family. I play the cello. Probably not many people know that. I have always been a keen amateur cellist. In the same way that I have trouble with self-belief as a writer, I it's the opposite with cello. I really overestimate my my abilities as a cellist. Um, uh, so there's that. And probably this will sound odd, but I'm quite obsessed with tennis. Um, I I play tennis 2 or 3 times a week. It is a late life passion of mine. Uh, so there you have it. Now you know all my terrible secrets. My darkest secret probably is my tennis habit.
Excuse me. So what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have with you when you're writing or editing? Like, for example, what type of food or drink, or if any, do you need to have with you?
My writing space, it's not a glamorous space. It's not the nicely appointed bedroom that I'm currently in. I write in the laundry room. Uh, there's a finished basement under the house that has the the washer dryer. Actually, just the washer. Australians don't have clothes dryers, as it turns out. Um, there's a trestle table in there. It's made of cement. I mean, the room is made of cement. And that is where I do my work. It's not glamorous. Um, I am a horrible abuser of caffeine, so I have to have coffee. And the other thing I have to have is I have to have other people's books. There's outliners and pantsers, but there's another way to divide up writers, and it's between people who read all the time while they're writing, and other people like to seal themselves off so they can focus on their own voice. I read other writers all the time, all
Hmm.
day. I'm sitting there going from my work, oh, Joe Abercrombie does this well. I'd better look at his stuff for a second. Hilary Mantel, Kate Atkinson, these are writers that I consult all day, every day. So I have to have their books on my desk right there so I can just reach for them when I need them because I need them a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of writers say that one of their favorite things to do is read.
Yeah. Zadie Smith has a great essay about it. And she thinks of it as sort of tuning her instrument, which I think is a good way of thinking of it.
Yeah.
You need somebody else has to play the A so you can make sure that you're in tune.
Mhm. Absolutely. So when you're writing, do you prefer music or silence? And if music, what type?
I mostly write in silence. Uh, there are times when I'm writing a scene, it's a very emotional scene. Um, and sometimes I will struggle to summon the emotion on the day when I'm writing that scene. And in that case, I'll turn to other books or sometimes to music. But mostly I am easily distracted. And even music is usually too much for me to write to. I stick to silence and the washing machine. The washing machine is usually
I
going
was going to
there.
say the washing machine. If you're writing a really tense scene, the washing machine's going.
Yeah, no, it's good. A little white noise in the background. Sometimes it gets unbalanced and it starts banging very loudly. Um, that's
Yeah.
part of it. That helps too.
Writers very often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them with their work. And do you have any? And do they help or hinder you?
I'm so devoted to my cat. Um, I went on tour for the Bright Sword, and a week before I left, our cat, whose name is Gandalf, went missing. Um, and we put up signs everywhere. I walked the streets constantly, calling her name, and she didn't come back. And then we all left. We had to go to America, and we left knowing that our cat was lost. We didn't think she was coming back. It was really difficult. Um, and then 2 weeks after we got to America, the phone rang, and they said, um, uh, "That's a cat in my backyard," and this is the number on her tag. And anyway, she came back, but it was incredibly emotional. And
Wow.
yes, Gandalf is a big help.
Oh, wow. Yeah. My cat
Uh,
was underneath me just
yeah,
right now.
I wish Gandalf were here so I could show you. She's a very she's like a comedy cat. She's not one of those really
What kind of
dignified
a
cats.
cat?
Well, she's gray. Our parent, she's half of a British short hair, but then she's half Munchkin, which I think is not considered a respectable breed necessarily. But it means that she has her legs are very short. She's sort of like a dachshund cat, and she has one of those very pushed in sort of show cat faces, but then also the short legs. Um, we have a Siamese cat too, who is incredibly beautiful and dignified. But then the other one, who's always falling off things and knocking things over, that's Gandalf. Anyway, but she's a big help.
Well, that's good. My cat was just here and trying to get my attention. I was like, no, no. Oh, okay. Just have two more questions for you. One, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And here she is again. Aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and you can get Lev's book at Annie's Bookstop of Worcester if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else could people find your books?
You can always find them online. I often point people to bookshop.org, which I don't know how you feel about bookshop.org, but it liaises with independent bookstores. I just yesterday, for the first time, heard the audiobook of The Bright Sword, which it had been out for a month or so, but I hadn't heard it. It's amazing. They did it so well. Highly
Really?
recommend it. And that's it's on Apple, it's on Audible, all the places that you would expect.
Oh, wow. So you have an audiobook too. Great. Excellent.
Uh,
Now,
they didn't
and
for that.
my last question is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Oh, I'm on social media probably more than is healthy. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Threads, on Blue Sky. I like Blue Sky a lot. I'm on Instagram. Uh, uh, I recently got onto TikTok. I probably have the least watched videos in all of TikTok. So I urge everybody, you could be the third or fourth person to see my videos. Um, but yeah, easy to find.
And your webpage?
It's right, levgrossman.com.
Okay. Well, that's all I have for you. Well, thank you very much, Lev, for joining me today, and hopefully, and good luck with your book, The Bright Sword,
Thank you so much.
and
Great
and
pleasure.
it was wonderful. And I know you're in Australia, but if you ever get to the Boston area or Worcester area, it would be great to see you.
I will definitely stop in. My mom still lives in Cambridge, so
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, definitely do that then. Thank you very much. Bye.